All right, so for those of you that are wondering what Dungeons and Dragons are, Bonnie has prepared a basic explanation for those of us that are new completely to Dungeons and Dragons. Um, Once again, thank you, Bonnie, for joining us and helping us through all this cool stuff.
Not a problem. All right, so I may have repeated some things in this, so apologies for that. But let's get into it. Dungeons and Dragons, a basic explanation, more or less. So what is D&D? I mean, my favorite analogy is like it's a tabletop video game, but basically you have the players, you have the Dungeon Master who controls the rules, circumstances. Dice checks also help to determine these outcomes, but we'll get more into that. Set in a fictional world, there's a lot of different ways that can go. Like super old school fantasy, medieval, etc. But, like people have, done their own thing with it. But yeah, you create the characters you play as, and the DM is basically like the rest of the video game. There's 3 key parts. You have the campaign, the party, which is the players, and the Dungeon Master. All those things need to be there. The campaign is basically the main quest of the video game. Something your players need to accomplish, that goal can change over time, and the campaign can still continue after that goal has been completed. You can, find new things to do. But you also have, like, side quests, your non-playable characters or NPCs, which are just people that the DM creates for you to talk to, because, you could probably have a campaign with just the players, but that would actually be really interesting. Anyway. But yeah, the campaign is main quests, side quests, all taking part in this fictional world. There's 2 main different types of campaigns. You have a module, which is a pre-written campaign, and generally pretty straightforward. I think a lot of them can be done in just like one session. So you and your friends sit down all together, you play this campaign over a few hours, and then usually it's done after that. I believe there are longer ones. I have not played a module myself, so I don't entirely know. But you also have homebrew campaigns where your Dungeon Master or DM creates the world, the lore, the side quests, the NPCs. They create encounters for you. Pretty much the DM builds the video game minus you as the players. We're still using the video game analogy. We have the party, the players, who you get to build, and you get to decide the class, the race, personality of your character. You can come up with a backstory or like weird little skills that they have. And your job as the player is pretty much just to decide what you want to do and how you want to do it. You say, oh, I want to go steal something from the city guard. I say, okay, how do you want to do that? Roll for this. And again, we'll get to dice decks later. But yeah, there's some things you definitely can't do as a player, but a lot of things you definitely can. You just tell the DM, I want to do this, or whatever it is. And then the Dungeon Master, DM, creates the campaign or runs the module, makes sure everyone's on track with that. It's the DM's job to describe the setting, the world, what's going on. You control the NPCs. You basically have to, it's like a game of like putting on different hats and like, now I'm talking as this person, now I'm talking as that person. Which can be fun. The DM charge of giving you challenges to overcome and also giving you rewards. Like, usually if you defeat like a big bad scary guy, you might have some really fun magical loot on him that you can give to the players as like a congratulations, here's fun stuff. Keeping things on track, and also improvisation. If something absolutely ridiculous happens that your player decides to do, it's your job to figure out what is going to happen now, which is necessary. Your players will surprise you. They will. There's also rules, as there is in any game. It's more applicable in combat, like when you're fighting an enemy, and different dungeon masters and players vary in how strict they are about those rules. There's some people who really just go like to the T, like, we're not gonna do anything else besides follow these rules. Absolutely. Other people are more lenient. As long as you find a system that works for you and for your players, that's really all that matters. So combat is where most of these rules are applicable. It's turn-based combat, so when you face an enemy and you're about to start fighting, the dungeon master is going to say, roll for initiative, which determines the order of like who attacks first, and then second, and then third, etc., etc., etc. There's also different actions that you can take while you're in combat. You can attack, or you can dodge, you can disengage. I forgot to put dash on there. But it's basically like you can do one of those things. You get one action on your turn, you get one of those. You also have bonus actions that vary between classes, like the different types of like fighter you are, like barbarian, monk, wizard, warlock. So there's all sorts of different things that you can do as a bonus action depending on your class. You also have reactions, which is exactly what it sounds like. It's a reaction to something. And the rules that you have in combat, the enemy probably does not have. Or, again, this is one of those things that it just kind of depends, like, what it is you're fighting. It might be like this huge, crazy, scary enemy that has all these sorts of different actions. Like, a lot of the really big ones have something called a legendary action, and if you hit them, they can basically say, no, you didn't. Stuff like that. So just, make sure you know what you are doing as a player and what you can and can't do. There's also rules about movement, like how far you can move. And I guess just to preface that, once you get into initiative, I don't know where it is right now, but generally the DM will have some sort of map with like a grid on it. Each space is 5 spaces. Your character can move so many spaces during their turn. Again, that varies between classes, enemies, etc. I think I deleted this slide, but back to rules. The rule of cool is something that I just call it in terms of hey, I wanted to do this really cool, crazy thing. If it's cool and we can make it work, let's do it. Rule of cool. You can still do that in combat to kind of ease the strictness of combat rules, but there might be some sort of mild consequence, like, oh, you won't get to attack on your next turn then, or you'll only get to do a bonus action because you're trying to do too much right now. And also in combat, just know your character. Really know what you can do, what you can't do. know your modifiers, which again we'll get to that later. And if you're playing a spellcasting class, just know your spells, know what they do. If you don't know or if you forget, look it up. Easy. Let's see. Role playing. This is pretty much everything that is not combat or out of initiative, out of that list of who attacks first, whatever. The rules are a lot less strict here. There's a lot more you can kind of get away with, dice checks permitting, your GM permitting. But generally, this part of the game is more like conversational. You're talking to people, looking for things, investigating things. You're trying to find.
All right, we're just waiting for Bonnie to come back here. Technical difficulties. Oh, are you back? I don't know if you can hear us, Bones, but your video's frozen, but the slide moved. And this is what happens when you do virtual programming over the internet. I'm sure things will get straightened out here in no time.
This is actually getting
there we go.
Before.
There we go. You're back. All right. Can you hear us? Uh-oh. All right.
Oh no.
Yep.
No. Sorry.
All right. So, we lost you for probably about 30 seconds or so on the previous slide. Everything kind of froze, and we lost all audio.
All right. I can redo that.
So we had not gotten to traveling, staying at inns, but we had you were talking about investigative stuff and different things.
Okay. I will pick up there and put in a slide about this. Sorry. Oh no.
Oh, that's okay. The audio is doing some funny stuff, but we'll just keep going. This is what happens when virtual programming is virtual.
Something before that I didn't is a character sheet. You get one of these when you make your player. There's I'm doing this backwards. You can put in your class. You have all of these stats. Perception. Saying oh, you have to do a dice check for that. It's reliant on what you've already made.
We're working on getting stuff sorted out.
All right. We're going to continue on.
All right. So I think I don't know. Do you want to try cutting the video feed on your end and just continuing audio? Because our voice channel, we can pop right back into it, I believe, with just voices.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Okay,
I can still hear you.
My internet has been garbage today.
That's okay. Here.
Anywho.
All right, yeah.
Yeah, and if I can, I will send you a link to a character sheet that you can find online. So
Okay,
you can
yeah.
look more at that.
And
actually.
there's you can get all the handbooks and everything too. You can find that right online, right? Like people don't have to buy stuff for this. Like most of the information on how to play and DMing and stuff, that's available online.
Yeah, there's definitely a lot of links to like PDF versions of the books. How do I put this? Like, I definitely think if you find out that you really want to play D&D, really into it, etc., that you should invest in buying a book, just because, you might not always, like I right now don't have the best internet connection. So it's definitely useful then, and after a while, once you really get into it, you will have a collection of books. But yeah, you can, I think if you just look up D&D Player's Handbook PDF, you should be able to find a link.
Okay.
The other kind of important thing is you want to make sure that everyone is looking at the same version or the same edition of the handbook. The most up-to-date one right now is the 5th edition. So you should be able to just type in like 5e 5th edition and find a link that way.
So all of your players and your dungeon master, everybody's got to be on the same page as far as what edition of the handbook you're using?
Yes.
Okay.
I haven't looked at past editions a lot, but I do know that there was somebody I was talking to a while ago about Dungeons and Dragons, and they said, I'm running a 4th edition campaign. And I said, okay, cool, I'm running a 5th edition campaign. So
okay.
I don't know how much the rules change between those editions, but just to make sure everyone is on the same page, everyone understands exactly how things are going to go, it's necessary.
Okay, cool.
So let's get back to this PowerPoint. But before my internet cut out, I was talking about role-playing. And it's pretty much everything that isn't fighting. It's everything that is when you are not in combat. And this can be a really, really good storytelling tool as well, especially if you know your characters' backstories. You can introduce people that they knew, or create situations based on their backstory that gives the players an emotional connection to what's happening and what's going on, and really just get your players more immersed in the story. Role-playing is great. And now, dice checks. So, I think I talked a little bit about this when I was showing the character sheet, and I will send you a link to this as well. But basically, it's determined by your character, or I should say, personalized skills, that you have on your character sheet. So you roll the dice to try and intimidate somebody, or to try and climb up a tree, that's happened more times in campaigns than I ever thought it would, somebody trying to climb a tree. But you roll to see how well you climb that tree or intimidate that person. And you pretty much always, unless it's a weird circumstance, you have a 20-sided dice, which is called the D20. You're going to roll that. If you get a 20, you do really, really well. If you get a 1, you do really bad, that's called a critical success or a critical failure. Also abbreviated or shortened to crit fail, crit success, or a natural 20, natural 1. But then on your character sheet, you're going to have something called a modifier, which you then add to that score. So let's say you do a dice check to climb a tree, you roll a 15, you add your modifier, like you climb the tree, you do amazing, you get up that tree so well. Or it goes really, really badly if you roll like a 1 or a 2, or somewhere in the middle. But you will have a lot of dice checks during the game. That's just how it is. I think that pretty much covers that. Oh, and this is also kind of something, I don't know if it's like super important that I mention this or not, but you can also do dice checks which is called advantage or disadvantage. So you would roll the dice twice, and if it's an advantage, you take the higher, disadvantage at the lower of the 2 rolls that you make. And that's usually very situational. It doesn't happen all the time. And oh my gosh, I knew I put a slide on here about character sheets.
Well, the video was freezing a lot we saw the character sheet in the video feed briefly, but we didn't actually get most of the audio, so feel free to go through another summary. I don't think it could hurt.
Absolutely. I for sure will. And I originally made this PowerPoint to try and explain D&D to my parents.
Perfect.
I get that into it, so that's why I was like, I will walk you through this. It's like a very intense process. But when you're making your character sheet, like the first thing you have to figure out is what race am I going to be and what class am I going to be, because you will get certain perks based on those classes or the race that you play. I know that I think Dragonborn, when you're filling out your character sheet, you have I guess different skills like strength, dexterity, intelligence, wisdom, all that. And if you're playing a Dragonborn, you get extra points to your charisma score.
Okay.
Things like that. So you want to figure out exactly like who, or at least the race and class of your character before you start working on this. And something I usually advise to people, like new players, is if you are playing a character, like let's say a sorcerer, all of your spells are going to be based on your charisma modifier. So it's maybe not a bad idea to play as a certain race that like naturally gets more points added to their charisma score. Things like that. And that's like you can do whatever you want.
So you really get to build your character to, using the different things in the handbook, you get to build your character based on like how you want to play and what you want to play. That's kind of neat.
Exactly. Yes, absolutely. And there's really no rules to it either. Like if you want to be like a big bulky half orc, but decide you also want to be like a sneaky rogue, like do that. Like I've seen people come up with some of the most interesting characters just because it sounds fun, and it's like I think unless you're purposely trying to make a bad character that's going to be like just weak and not fun to play, like you really can't go wrong with how you make your character. Like there's definitely things that you want to try to optimize, or like make sure that you have a certain, or I guess a high score in something specifically, so you know that unless you roll really badly, you're going to be able to do well. But yeah, I also just love the character building part of this game. It's so much fun. Yeah, as long as you know like the character that you're trying to make, It's a really fun process, and something that I really forgot about when I made one of my characters was your armor class, which is like your defense. It's being like if somebody tries to hit you, like they roll to see if they hit you, and they have to beat whatever your armor class is to be able to hit you. So do not forget about that. I was just getting absolutely obliterated with one of my characters every time we fought. It was horrible.
That sounds very important for combat scenes.
Yes, my character, I'm not making this up, my character died twice. Like, died. And I got to have a few sessions as a ghost, which was really cool of the DM at the time. Like, I haunted people. It was really fun.
So wait, normally if your character dies, does that mean that you're just done and no longer part of the campaign? Or does it depend?
Yes.
It depends on the. It's obviously it does depend on the dungeon master because you just said you got to be a ghost. So, all right.
Yeah, it definitely depends. Something also that happens is if you're in combat. And again, this is just the rules that, like, I was taught learning how to play Dungeons & Dragons, and I've kind of adopted it as my own. Well, to some degree. This is a rule, but it's also kind of not a rule. I don't know how to describe it. But if you're in combat and an enemy drops you to 0 hit points, you are unconscious, you're laying prone, and then you have to make what is called a death saving throw. So you roll a d20. If it's above 10, you get a success. If it's below 10, you get a failure. And after 3 successes or 3 failures, you're either like, okay, like you get like 1 hit point back, or if you get 3 fails, like you're dead. You're done. That's it. And my DM had the really cool idea to, number one, he told us all after I had become a ghost, he said, if you drop to 0 hit points and you fail all of your death saves, you get to be a ghost until the party can figure out how to bring you back to life. And that was unique to how he ran things. I have not heard of other people doing that. But he knew that, like, we all really loved our characters. We wanted to be able to play more of them. So that was his rule. And then my character died again, and that's it. That was it for her. What was I just gonna say? I think there's another rule about how, like, say you have 5 hit points left and an enemy deals like 30 hit points of damage, you still have to take into account those extra 25 points, and if it gets more than your normal amount of hit points that you have, like, in total, then you die. I think there's a rule about that somewhere. I'm not entirely sure about it, though, because that just sounds really stressful, and it shouldn't be that stressful. But yeah, I think that about covers that. I'm gonna go back to that slide in a minute. I do have some vocab terms that I think I kind of went over before, but campaign is like the overarching story. A session is like you and your friends. I guess if we're using the video game analogy again, the campaign is the video game. A session is like you sitting down to play that video game for however much time. Dice checks, rolling the dice to see how well you did at whatever thing you're trying to do. Your class is basically the set of skills that you want your player to have and, like, your fighting style. So, like, you could be a barbarian or a wizard or a monk. I know that there's other things that I could add to this, but I think it would just get more confusing, honestly. But I I think those are kind of like the most important ones to know, just besides like what I've already talked about. And I've already kind of talked about this. Side notes, know your dice. Like I said, there's seven different dice, and they all have a different amount of like sides on them. Just be able to recognize like what's what. Obviously, it's like there's going to be a little bit of a learning curve, but just try and like get to know it more. So when your DM says, okay, like roll your damage or do this, you're not saying like, oh, like shoot, like which one is the D8 again? Which one is the D4? Which one is like, just, you know, like do your best to get to know your dice. The second thing isn't a necessary thing, but try to have a well-balanced party. Like if everyone is a wizard, like it could go very bad. And again, that's like, this is just like my own personal preference. Do whatever you want. But usually having a more well-balanced party allows for different circumstances and different outcomes. Again, like if everyone is a ranged player, they're not going to do well in like close-up combat. So, I don't know. That's just a personal preference. If you are not sure about something, ask your DM. If you're like, hey, I really don't understand how this works, can I do that? What did you just say about this thing again? Do I know what's going on with that? Just ask. If they don't want to tell you, they'll just say, you don't know. Do you want to find out? Or, you know, whatever it is. Again, I briefly talked about the rule of cool. Definitely this is something, just double check with your dungeon master and like whoever else you're playing with. Just see like how strict are you guys about the rules? Like if I can make it work, can I do this really crazy thing? But that only goes so far. You can't just decide, oh, I'm just a normal person, but I want to fly 10 feet into the air, but like just because I want to do it. No magic items required. Like you can't do that. And you can always ask out-of-game questions as well. Kind of the same thing as if you're not sure, ask, but like it's better to just ask a question than to sit there being confused about it or unknowingly like quote-unquote cheating at something. Or just not using the full potential of your character because you don't know. I think that's it. The last slide just is things will be more clear once you start playing. This seems like a lot. It seems overwhelming. I definitely, at some point, feel like I'm just talking a bunch of nonsense. This is going to make no sense. But definitely once you start playing and you start building your character, you realize, like, oh, that's what she was talking about. Oh, that's what that meant. So, if you're curious about playing Dungeons & Dragons, like, find people to play with, figure it out. It's super, super fun. Yeah, I think that's it.
Awesome. I know that's it. This whole presentation, you know, audio problems aside, it's been very, very helpful. I was invited to join a campaign a long time ago that never panned out, but I started to do the character creation process and, you know, figure out what class I wanted to be and figure out what race I wanted to be. And it was a lot not having a background in it at all. And really, I knew what a campaign was and I knew what a session was, but beyond that, I had no idea. This is the kind of information I was definitely looking for then. So, thank you so much.
No problem. I'm glad it helped. Like, I truly can't stress enough. It looks and sounds so overwhelming. But, like, I don't know. Once you get started, as long as how do I put this? It's, I think, definitely a good idea, like, the first time you decide to play Dungeons & Dragons, like, have somebody, at least one person there, who has some sort of experience, or just generally knows what they're doing, because I remember when some of my friends and I first started playing, our dungeon master was the only one who had played it before, and he was trying to help us figure things out, and I was so confused. I was like, I don't know what this means. What's an armor class? What are modifiers? Like, there's no way I could have figured it out by myself, so definitely find someone who at least kind of knows what they're doing.
And it seems like there's a really good community. Like, I've seen Discord servers for D&D players. I've seen YouTube channels for different stuff. Like, even if you don't have any friends that are into it right now, you can probably find somebody either in the local area or someone somewhere knows. This is D&D's been going on for a number of years now. And I know players, teenagers right through adults with lots of kids. And it's something that I've seen lots of different people from lots of different backgrounds get involved in. I think it's really neat how it's just this, universal storytelling game that resonates with all sorts of different people.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, I mean, absolutely, like, if you don't have anyone to play with, like, I know, oh gosh, I feel so bad that I'm blanking on the name of this. I think it's called Critical Role, I believe. I'm like 90% positive. I might just be having a brain fart. Please don't come at me if I'm wrong. But they do, they'll do videos of their campaign, and I don't know, like you just said, there's so many resources. There's a lot of subreddits. There's all sorts of different information. I know that there's a pretty strong Dungeons and Dragons community on TikTok. And a lot of fun ways to just see what people are doing. What are people coming up with outside of the standard published books? People have homebrewed monsters and homebrewed items and spells, and people even make their own modules for people to play. There's so many resources online. Just always remember to communicate with your dungeon master and make sure that everyone's kind of on the same page for the expectations of the campaign. Yeah, because I don't know, you never want to be the guy that's it's totally cool if I just bring in this really crazy homebrew thing that I found on the internet, and your DM and your other players might not be down with it. Make sure everyone just is gonna be comfortable and having fun in whatever campaign style you choose to run.
Cool. Well, this has all been really awesome advice. Thank you again to Bonnie for helping us out here at the library and getting us a little bit more familiar with what Dungeons and Dragons is.
Absolutely. Happy to get more people involved in this amazing and very addictive game. I will warn you that once you start playing and you really like playing, you probably will just start buying yourself a lot. I think I have 8 dice sets now.
Oh, wow.
I don't need that many dice. I don't.
Warning received. All right.